This morning, a new book reveals what may be the biggest secret from last year's presidential campaign. The White House considered replacing Vice President Joe Biden with then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
CBS News contributor Bill Daley was the president's chief of staff at that time. He says he did ask aides to look into the idea of replacing Biden with Clinton. Bill, good morning.
Hi, how are you, Charlie? I think this, if I may, there's a little bit of an overhype with the book coming out on this issue.
All right, let me read you what the book says. The top echelon of Obama world had in fact been discussing the wisdom of replacing Biden with Hillary. That more than discussing it, they had been exploring it furtively and obliquely in the campaign's polling and focus groups, and that Daley himself had been the most vocal exponent of looking into the merits of the idea.
Look, I think one of the jobs of chief of staff is to recommend lots of things outside the box and to look at things, but not for a moment was there a serious discussion or a belief that Joe Biden should be replaced, period. That doesn't mean issues were not looked at. Lots of issues in 2011 were looked at. But, and even in the lead, to be honest with you, when Norris said in the Oval Office, anybody who would have brought this idea into the president in the Oval Office, in my opinion, probably would have been thrown out immediately. But in 2011, part of my job, as I always saw, was to think outside the box and say, what if, and maybe we ought to look at this issue or that issue. And it was looked at, but it was never seriously looked at in the sense that there was a belief that it ought to be done or needed to be done. And the truth is, any research that was done confirmed the fact that that was not an issue that the voters cared about or thought that should be done. And the president, in my opinion, believed then, and I believe now, not for a moment would he have ever considered that.
So, Bill, but you do acknowledge the what if, as you say, was asked, and that there was polling and focus groups done on whether Hillary Clinton would help the ticket?
There was research done on all sorts of issues and people, and whether or not this or that, and that's a legitimate thing that campaigns do all the time. But it was not done, surely was not done with the intent that this ought to be done and there was need to do it. But in 2011, as you remember, Nora, it was a very difficult political year. And so my sense was we ought to look at everything here because this is it was a very difficult period politically. But not for a moment did, as far as I know, any of the senior people, surely including myself, thought that that was a good idea or needed to be done or should be done, or whether the president would ever even seriously consider it if you thought it was the right thing to do. Nobody that I know of the senior people, including myself, thought at that point that it would be a good idea.
And yet, did Hillary Clinton know that this research was being done and this polling being done?
Not that I know of, no.
But the book reports that she did know about it.
Well, if she did, she sure didn't find out from me.
Yeah, but you said John Heilemann, you've said John Heilemann told you about it. Who's the author of the book? Told you about it, that he knew, that he thought she knew.
Well, that's, as I say, that's news to me because this was not something that obviously keeping a secret in some organizations is rather difficult. Mm-hmm. But I don't have any knowledge of whether or not she knew or anybody else.
I'm looking for a short answer here.
Yeah.
You were there when the president was trying to work on Affordable Care. What surprises you most about what's happened to it?
Well, the truth is, I wasn't there when it was passed, when the bill was put together.
Right.
What has surprised me, obviously, is what has surprised the president the most, and that is the inability of the website, which was the primary way that people were going to get into the exchanges, is working, and the complexity of it. But having worked in government, not just as chief of staff, but as Secretary of Commerce, there are very few big, major projects that the government does anymore in a good way. And the bigger they are and the more complex and the more costly they are, the more challenging it is, it seems, for the government to perform. And that's a question that has to be looked at separate from the Affordable Care Act.
All right, Bill, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Nora.